One of the things I've always been interested in is this 80-20 ratio, which is a way of representing a disproportionately high reward versus the time and effort commitment that you put into a given thing. In this video, I'm going to look at 5 hobbies and interests where I've applied the approach that I take on this channel, where I jump into an enthusiast community and extract the secret insights that lurk in that community and then apply them on a more general day-to-day basis to really maximize the return on my investment in these hobbies and interests. And the first thing we're going to look at is the arts, this idea of creative pastime that is incredibly rewarding. And there's no limit on the number of scientific pieces of research that demonstrate the connection between creative pastimes and all kinds of mental health benefits. And there's this 73% reduction in cognitive decline, but there is this barrier to entry normally associated with a lot of these pursuits, like learning a musical instrument or fine art. There's this sense that you have to spend your life doing these things to get the most out of them. And I think that puts a lot of people off even starting, myself included. What I've found myself doing over the last few months is learning a handwriting script called Spencerian. And I've obviously gone down the community rabbit hole. And one of the interesting secrets that I've revealed from this is that you're supposed to learn to write this handwriting script using the whole arm. So you keep your hand quite fixed and you use the whole arm to make those letter shapes. And it's such a drastically different approach than just shaping the letters with your fingertips. And you really get this sense of it going in as muscle memory, and you feel like you're then making these shapes on a subconscious level. And I think that's that sort of psychological, creative, rewarding element to all of this. And of course, you're making these marks on the page, and it's a very creative process. And it has an impact on the people around you. If you write somebody a note, then this handwriting is coming in. So it's sort of hugely applicable in the real world as well, but also incredibly rewarding as a creative pastime. And I think it's a real shame that when you first research this on YouTube, so many of these YouTubers are just talking about how to make the shapes with your fingertips. And it's actually, if you dig deep enough into the community, you'll find out that that's the wrong way of doing it. So the reward is there if you dig a little bit deeper into the community. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is food and drink, which is an interesting area, very different, not really a pastime, but it is one of these things that people spend a lot of money in this fine dining pursuit of, an amazing experience, an amazing taste and flavor experience. 2 things I'm going to talk about in this video are coffee and pizza. And these are areas, we're not talking about fine dining or anything like that, but we're talking about areas where we're up to this 80% of the reward, so we're getting huge reward from the pursuit of this with only a small investment to get that. And in terms of coffee, what we're talking about is using espresso at home to make our coffee at home. So instead of just a cafetiere or any other kind of brew method, if you use espresso, you're just leveling up this experience, and it is absolutely amazing and such an obvious difference as well. I'm not talking, you don't have to be a coffee connoisseur to notice the difference here. It's immediately obvious to everybody we've made coffees for as a result of using espresso. And it comes out of the kind of drilling down into the enthusiast community that you figure out that you can actually get away perfectly well with using just a small hand grinder is enough to get the fineness of the coffee grind that you need to make good espresso. And that's kind of half the battle. And then from there, we can use one of these newer, super affordable espresso brew machines like the Outin Nano. And there are a couple of different options at fairly low price points for this as well. All way lower than these kind of countertop machines that are thousands of pounds that will grind and brew for you. At first glance, that's what you would do if you want espresso at home. If you dig deeper into the community, you can find out how to do this without spending all that money. And the reward is absolutely huge. And then we're looking at pizza. Now, this is one of these things, it sounds kind of a bit silly, but it's actually, so we're talking about using a pizza oven at home to make pizza, cook pizza at home. This is the kind of experience that you'd get at a restaurant where they would use a proper pizza oven to cook the pizza, and you'd get a really good experience. But if you go out with another family as a group, if you say there's 8 of you ordering pizzas, you're going to spend a couple of £100 quite easily. For a little bit more than that, you can get your own pizza oven to keep in the garden over the summer months. And the experience of that includes that sort of social element that you get from going out to eat with friends in a restaurant. But actually what we really didn't expect was just how good the pizza coming out of the pizza oven was going to be, with only a fairly modest investment in terms of sort of learning how to do it. And I think it comes down to learning about the air temperature versus the stone temperature, learning how to control the wood fuel in the pizza oven to adjust those 2 things. And then, with a little bit of practice and a few tips and tricks like using semolina flour to keep the pizza sliding on the peel when you launch it into the oven. Those kinds of little tips and tricks will let you use this thing and get incredible pizza out of it. And again, we're talking about very obvious improvement over any kind of normal pizza that you'd get, including even those from restaurants and certainly takeaways, with just this small investment, which is only a little bit more than the cost associated with going out with a family, a group of friends, and buying pizza at a restaurant. Then the next thing we're going to talk about is travel and adventure, and this is broken into two parts. And the first is that we're going to look at the sort of secret way of getting a luxury automotive experience, and the trick is just simply to do the vehicle maintenance yourself, because once you do that, you put yourself in a category where you can get really old, really affordable luxury cars that most people don't buy because they're too expensive to maintain. What that means is they're too expensive to maintain at a garage. If you do it yourself, then you've unlocked this amazing experience, which is just normally reserved for people spending a huge amount of money when they buy these new under warranty. I'm talking about Land Rovers. We've got this old Land Rover Discovery 3, which is just a delightful experience to drive. Obviously, the fuel costs would be prohibitive if we were to use this as our only vehicle. So we actually use a cheap electric car as our sort of daily driver as well, which is part of the way that we justify keeping this for our holiday and adventure trips. So learning about mechanics in itself has been a hugely rewarding process. This is a great sort of thing to learn how to do, because it not only does it unlock this, but it's also a very rewarding thing to do in its own right. It's amazing to know that you're repairing an old machine and keeping it on the road and saving loads of money at the same time. So then from this budget luxury 4x4, we've taken this and we've turned it into our complete travel and adventure family holiday setup by putting a roof tent on it and building a sleeping platform inside and setting up a fridge. And then we've got the Julka system for shower and toilet tent that we keep just next to the vehicle. We've basically got the full camper van experience at a fraction of the cost of a camper van. Now, camper vans are super expensive. Like, there's one for sale near us at the moment. It's something like £11,000, and it's an old heap of a horrible, hideous plastic Fiat thing, white plastic everywhere. You know, just an awful thing, a huge amount of money for the cost of this old 4x4, and then reasonably inexpensive upgrades like the roof tent and the bits and bobs inside. You've got this amazingly accessible camping experience that lets us use all of the kind of attributes that you associate with a camper van. So the idea of just quickly going off for 1 or 2 nights stay, everything's ready to go, there's no barrier, and we're just really enjoying the sort of experience without having spent all that money if we were to go down the camper van road. And again, this comes out of jumping into the overlanding community and sort of figuring out how all this works. Little tricks like using the Land Rover with its air suspension to get a self-leveling setup for the roof tent. It's just an amazing combination of the merits of the Land Rover with the kind of overlanding setup there. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is music, just the idea of enjoying listening to music. And this is really interesting because as part of this sort of digital minimalism journey that I've gone down, I've been much more cynical of things like subscription services, and I've gone back now. I've cancelled my music subscription services, and I've gone back to the idea of using CDs, ripping those CDs, keeping a library on my computer and putting it on the iPod and listening to music, sat down in an armchair on speakers powered by the iPod. Of course, that means I can't just skip songs. I have to get up to go and do that. And the whole process has just made me so much more intentional with listening to music and, sort of working out what album to buy. Part of that's been really interesting because I've actually just been talking to ChatGPT about music. It's really good at suggesting what sort of albums you might like based on your taste. And one of the very best things that I think ChatGPT is good for, there are quite a few these days actually, but that is definitely one of them. And finding out about the artists involved in the different music that you listen to is sort of really enriching part of that process, just being that bit more intentional about it. And sort of it all starts from this idea of deciding what music you're going to invest in makes you take the whole thing a little bit more seriously. So that's been a really interesting journey, and just having that more intentional part of that experience has increased the reward whilst at the same time massively reducing the cost associated with that as well. The last thing I'm going to look at, again, very different area to anything else we've looked at in this video, is watches. So there's no upper limit on the amount of money that some people spend on watches. And I think this is just much more of a mindset shift than any kind of exploration of sort of, playing with things like effort and reward. This is much more about just working out where the maximum reward can be had at the minimum price point. And I think the Casio watch that I've got here is a really good example of this, because the G-Shock range of this particular style of watch goes right up to these super premium, made in Japan watches that still use this basic Casio octagonal design, but are made of really super top end materials and design that's inspired by Japanese cultural things like the calligraphy ink color and these interlocking woodworking things. These have gone into the design of these higher end models, and these are like £4,000. But really the essence of this whole approach, the octagonal design and all the rest of it with the G-Shock, is available at a much lower price point. This was only just over £100. And this is a watch that's really highly regarded by the watch enthusiast community. It's technically brilliant. It has solar charging and Bluetooth so that it gives you daylight saving times, aware time in your own time zone, but also the world time zone supports that functionality as well. So technically, from a utilitarian perspective, fantastic watch. And I think for me, I'm getting just as much enjoyment out of this as I would if I'd spent the £4,000 on the top. Obviously I would never do that, but the point is, at that point you're paying for a kind of much diminishing returns. You're into the luxury indulgent kind of investment element, collector scope, and I think that is where the reward starts to drop off from that. You know, you're spending way more, but you're not actually getting that kind of essence of the reward that can be had from a really nicely designed watch that you wear on your wrist every day. And I think that's where this kind of watch really fits in. It's a sort of super accessible price point, but it still taps into all of those elements that are so valued in the community. So if you've enjoyed my take on these things, and I hope it's been interesting, you'll really enjoy what I do with my day job, which is working on a CMS website platform with Chris Parnell in New Zealand. And we really solve day-to-day problems faced by small and medium-sized businesses with their website and their online customer experience. So if you're looking to level any of that up, just give me a shout at setseed.com. Thanks as always to all the members on this channel. Your support is super appreciated. You get access to my Zettel custom notes vault now, which includes all the research and notes that goes into these videos and all kinds of things that doesn't go into these videos as well. So there's never been a better time to become a member on this channel. If you've enjoyed this video, there's another one on the screen now that YouTube thinks you'll like, and I'll see you there.